Have you ever wondered why sometimes you can afford more with your paycheck and other times everything feels impossibly expensive? Why some decades bring prosperity while others bring financial chaos? Why do recessions happen? And more importantly, why do they always seem to catch us by surprise? In 2008, the world witnessed one of the most devastating economic collapses since the Great Depression. Millions lost their homes, their jobs, their savings. But here's the shocking truth. This disaster was entirely predictable. Not just predictable, it follows a pattern that has repeated throughout human history. The economy isn't some mysterious, unpredictable force. It's a machine. A surprisingly simple machine that operates on just a few basic principles. And once you understand how this machine works, you'll never look at money, debt, or economic news the same way again. I'm about to show you the economic machine, how it really works, why it creates boom and bust cycles, and the three fundamental forces that drive everything from your grocery bill to global financial markets. This knowledge helped legendary investor Ray Dalio predict and navigate the 2008 crisis. By the end of this video, you'll understand the economy better than most politicians. Chapter 1. The building blocks. Transactions. The economy seems overwhelmingly complex, but strip away all the jargon and it comes down to something remarkably simple. Transactions. Billions and billions of transactions, repeated over and over. Every single transaction works the same way. A buyer exchanges money or credit with a seller for goods, services, or financial assets. That's it. You buy coffee, you make a transaction. A company purchases equipment, that's a transaction. A government sells bonds, another transaction. But here's what makes this powerful. One person's spending is another person's income. When you spend $5 on coffee, that's income for the barista, for the coffee shop owner, for the coffee farmer halfway around the world. This creates a chain reaction. All transactions combined create what we call total spending, and total spending drives the entire economy. If you take total spending and divide it by the quantity of things sold, you get the price. This simple relationship explains inflation, deflation, economic booms, and crashes. Markets are just collections of buyers and sellers making transactions for similar things. The wheat market, the housing market, the stock market, all operating on the same basic principle. But there's a player in this game that changes everything. Chapter 2. Credit, the most important part. Credit is the most important part of the economy and probably the least understood. Here's why. It's the biggest and most volatile part. When we talk about money in the economy, most of it isn't actually cash. It's credit. In the United States, there's about $3 trillion of actual currency, but over $50 trillion in credit. Credit dominates our economic system. So what is credit? Credit is created the instant a lender agrees to give a borrower money with the promise they'll pay it back later. The moment credit is created, it turns into debt. Debt is an asset for the lender. They're owed money. But it's a liability for the borrower. They owe money. Now here's where it gets interesting. When a borrower receives credit, they can immediately increase their spending. Remember, spending drives the economy. So, increased credit means increased spending, which means increased income for someone else, which means they can borrow more, which leads to more spending. This is a self-reinforcing pattern. More credit, more spending, more income, more borrowing, more spending. Round and round. This is why we have economic cycles. But there's a catch. Debt allows you to consume more than you produce when you acquire it. Sounds great, right? But eventually you have to pay it back. And when you do, you're forced to consume less than you produce. The party doesn't last forever. Enter the central bank.
Unlike other buyers and sellers, central banks control the amount of money and credit in the economy. They do this primarily through interest rates. When the central bank raises interest rates, borrowing becomes more expensive. Fewer people take loans, credit contracts. When they lower rates, borrowing is cheaper, credit expands. This is how central banks try to smooth out the economic cycles. But, as we'll see, they can't prevent them. They can only influence them.
Chapter 3. The three forces that drive everything. Every swing in the economy, every boom and bust, every period of prosperity or hardship comes down to three main forces. Number 1, productivity growth. Productivity is how much value you create per hour of work. Over time, humans get better at producing things. We learn, innovate, develop technology. A farmer today produces vastly more food than a farmer 100 years ago. Productivity growth is the only thing that raises living standards in the long run. But productivity doesn't fluctuate much year to year. It's steady, gradual. This means productivity growth isn't what causes economic swings. Number 2, the short-term debt cycle. This cycle lasts 5 to 8 years and has happened repeatedly throughout modern history. It works like this. Expansion phase. Credit is easily available. People and businesses borrow and spend. This spending is someone else's income, so income's wise. Rising incomes mean people can borrow even more. Spending increases faster than production of goods. What happens? Prices rise. This is inflation. The central bank sees inflation getting too high. They raise interest rates. Borrowing becomes more expensive. People have to make larger debt payments. They have less money to spend. Spending slows. Contraction phase. Since one person's spending is another's income, incomes fall. People borrow less. Asset prices drop. This is a recession. Prices fall. Deflation. Economic activity decreases. The central bank sees this happening. They lower interest rates. Borrowing becomes cheaper again, credit expands, and the cycle repeats. This short-term debt cycle, controlled largely by central banks, happens over and over for decades. Number 3, the long-term debt cycle. This is the big one. Over decades, even as short-term cycles oscillate, debt steadily grows faster than incomes. Why? Because during each expansion, we borrow a bit more than we pay back during each recession. Little by little, the debt burden increases. At first, this isn't a problem. You borrow $1,000, your income rises by $1,000, no issue. You borrow another $1,000, your income rises $900. Still manageable, but eventually you reach a tipping point. Debt repayments start growing faster than incomes. People are forced to cut spending, but cutting spending means cutting someone else's income. Their income drops, so they cut spending. This feeds on itself. This is the long-term debt peak. It leads to what's called a deleveraging, a painful period when everyone tries to reduce their debt simultaneously. Asset prices crash, banks fail, stock markets collapse, social tensions explode. We saw this in the Great Depression of 1929. Japan experienced it in the 1990s, and the world went through it in 2008.
Chapter 4. The Deleveraging Crisis. When a deleveraging happens, the economy enters dangerous territory. Unlike a normal recession, simply lowering interest rates doesn't fix it. Why? Because interest rates often hit zero. They can't go lower. People cut spending, austerity. But if everyone cuts spending simultaneously, incomes collapse faster than debt burdens fall. Deflation takes hold. Assets become worth less, but your debt stays the same. You're drowning. Throughout history, there are 4 ways to escape a deleveraging. 1. People, businesses, and governments cut spending, austerity. painful but reduces debt. 2. Debts are reduced through defaults and restructurings. Borrowers admit they can't pay. This hurts lenders and damages credit markets. 3. Wealth is redistributed from the haves to the have-nots. Higher taxes on the wealthy, social programs, politically controversial but provides relief. 4. The central bank prints new money. This can cause inflation but stimulates spending. If these 4 methods are balanced correctly, you can have what's called a beautiful deleveraging. Debts decline relative to income. Real economic growth returns to positive. Inflation stays manageable. It's difficult to achieve, but possible. The 2008 crisis saw all 4 methods deployed. The U.S. Federal Reserve printed trillions of dollars. Governments bailed out banks and increased spending. Some debts were written off. Taxes on the wealthy increased. It was messy, controversial, and took years, but eventually the economy stabilized.
Chapter 5. The 3 Rules. If you take away nothing else from this video, remember these 3 rules. Rule number 1. Don't have debt rise faster than income. If your debt grows faster than your ability to pay it back, eventually the burden becomes unbearable. This applies to individuals, businesses, and entire countries. Debt is a tool, not a solution. Rule number 2. Don't have income rise faster than productivity. If your income grows, but you're not actually producing more value, you become uncompetitive. Countries that print money without increasing productivity see their currencies weaken. Workers who demand higher wages without improving skills lose jobs to automation or overseas competition. Rule number 3. Do all you can to raise your productivity. In the long run, productivity is what matters most. Everything else, credit, debt cycles, monetary policy, are just short-term fluctuations. Real prosperity comes from learning, innovating, and becoming more efficient. The economy isn't a mysterious force. It's a machine driven by human nature and simple mechanics. We borrow in good times, repay in bad times. We innovate and grow more productive over decades. Central banks try to smooth the ride. Understanding this machine doesn't just help you make sense of headlines or protect your investments, it helps you see that economic crises aren't random acts of fate. They're predictable patterns. And with knowledge comes the power to prepare, adapt, and prosper even when others panic. The economic machine will keep turning. Cycles will continue, but now you understand how it works.